Good morning. This is the December 20th meeting of the Assembly Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee. And as we get started, we'll take the roll. Start with Mr. Palsy.
Bill Falta, the municipal manager.
Mark Spafford, General Manager, SWS.
Glenn Hansel, Operations Manager, Solid Waste Services.
Alex Slivka, CFO.
Christopher Constant.
Felix Rivera. Forrest Dunbar.
Keep going.
Mark Johnston, MLP. Brett Ruppla, KW.
Stephen Caldwell, CBS.
Steve Rebuffo, Port of Alaska.
Might as well keep going.
Steve Nelson from Water and Wastewater.
Julie Haskett, Chugach Electric.
Lee Beaver, Chugach Electric. Brian Hickey, Chugach Electric.
Tony Drullers, MEA.
40,000 Berlin.
Max Lower, manager budget.
Thank you. If there's no objection, I would like to change the order and take up the MLP Chugach Electric update so they don't have to sit through this whole conversation that we're about to have about municipal utilities. So if you don't mind, Ms. Balsey and Mr. Thiebert, anything to report?
I think there is something to report, but it's the Chugaches update.
Number one, we appreciate the vote of the Assembly on the 4th, and we did have our board meeting last night, and we got a unanimous vote to move forward with the transactions. We believe we do have the financials. Thank you, Alex, for getting those completed. And we reviewed those. We're satisfied with all the documents that we have, all of the agreements. And right now it's just trying to making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and making sure all the schedules meet our parameters. So I think we are ready to go. And so I think when the municipality is ready to sign, we're ready to sign. So good news, and we really appreciate the work of the Assembly and with the administration in making this thing to fruition. And we look forward to going through the regulatory process, which should start sometime in between January and February. So good progress.
That's big progress. Ms. Balsey, anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is I think we do feel really comfortable where we are. We think we're on target, we're on track. We should be wrapping this up soon and getting it ready and packaged for the RCA. I will tell you, we had MEA come to one of these meetings previously, and there was some conversation about how they're participating or not participating in the hydro side. We did get a letter from them recently indicating that they are not going to give us a hard answer by the end of the year, and expressing some of the same thoughts that they had previously, that they'd like to do more community dealing. We'll work through that, but that's sort of an open question at this point.
All right. Anything else?
I just want to say I did provide a resolution that our board passed last night, so that's available for.
And I handed it to the members. I have a couple more copies here, one for the clerk to put up on the website. And then, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And any questions from the members? It's right there. Forrest has a couple copies. Okay, no questions then. Thank you for the report, and we'll be back for a conversation in January. See what's happened since then. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a briefing from the Port Solid Waste, AWW, and MLP on the earthquake. Mr. Palsy?
So I think we wanted to use this hour to do some show and tell. So after having made it through the earthquake event, getting operations back to normal status from the outside, it's worth going over and showing what kind of damages we have discovered. I think the order we're going to go is SWS, the Port, then MLP, and then ALU. And I'll just hand it over, and we'll get the lights and start doing the show and tell.
Okay, so again, Mark Spafford, GM with SWS, and I have to my left is Glenn Hansel, who's our operations manager. Glenn is the guy that, like, if I was to get a job playing in like a tribute band for Jimi Hendrix and got like my dream job and had to leave it, Glenn would be the guy that takes over for me after that. But I thought it was appropriate to have Glenn kind of walk through the presentation because Glenn has been an employee here for over 30 years. He, as a matter of fact, has probably put the first load of solid waste into the Anchorage Regional Landfill. So he's got 30 plus years of history. His family's been here. He comes from a line of Muni employees. His dad worked for the Muni. And also what I wanted to share with Glenn, which is something I really appreciate about him, is that when the earthquake happened on November 30th, there was obviously a lot of shaking going on. We were all kind of meeting in a room at the transfer station, and so we were scrambling around to make sure everybody was safe and secure. And what I really appreciated about Glenn is that when I was talking to my wife, who was freaked out, he heard her voice over the phone and said, "Mark, hey, get out of here, go take care of your family. I got this." And so I can't speak enough to what Glenn kind of did that day, as well as all the rest of the Muni employees, as well as individuals at SWS just kind of pulled through during that event. So I wanted to share that before turning it over to Glenn to share some of the pictures of the damage that we sustained at the Anchorage Regional Landfill at our warm storage mechanics shop, as well as the admin building at ARL. So I'll turn it over to Glenn.
So this building was built in 1986 as the major infrastructure for the Anchorage Regional Landfill. When we opened the landfill in 1987, this building was brand new. As you can see from these pictures, and just go ahead and start rolling through them, I guess. The building did what it was supposed to do. It fractured where it was supposed to, and it stayed standing. But all of the engineers that have looked at it so far have looked at it and said, "Yeah, stay out of it." We have since completely evacuated the warm storage and the mechanical shop. We've got our mechanics working basically in the field out of 2 different pickup trucks with their tools in them, and we've kind of made some temporary facilities with some heaters and are kind of doing what we can do to get by until we figure out something on a temporary basis. But as you can see, these 2 overhead heaters in the warm storage fell down off the ceiling, broke the gas lines, and filled that shop up with gas as well. So things got interesting out there in a hurry. We were able to get the gas shut off, actually a couple of my guys spent the time, got the gas lines plugged off, the gas turned back on, and by the time the electricity came back on, we actually were back up and running for heat. So, but as you can see from these pictures, like that door frame is the man door going into the main shop there, and the whole door jamb itself is so tweaked that door won't even close. We're still waiting for the final engineer's report on cost of repair, but so far everybody that's talked to us says, yeah, they doubt if it can be repaired cost effectively versus tearing it down and starting over.
And I'll say that's one of the reasons why we started with SWS. The pictures are dramatic-ish, mostly cracks and cement blocks, but what is the punchline here is that this facility, maybe uniquely among the Muni assets, could be the red tag total loss, that we just might have to tear this guy down and start over.
And so, yeah, it's for, the pictures just kind of speak for themselves. This building is our major infrastructure for the landfill. This is where all our heavy equipment is worked on. The warm storage portion of it is where we keep our leach tankers so that they don't freeze up overnight. Water truck, which is our major fire suppression for the landfill itself. Sanders, anything that we need to operate the landfill is kept in there, kept warm, and worked on within that shop. And so, like I say, this is a crack in the landfill itself that in one of the side slopes of the landfill that showed up. We were fortunate that the weather was warm and rainy because immediately after this, the warm rain, actually the water ran into that crack and froze and sealed that crack up for us. So we now won't have to deal with that crack until springtime because that slope is so steep. And so I see we can't get equipment on there right now to deal with it if we had to. So fortunate Mother Nature sealed that one up for us. In the interim, what we've done to try to maintain some heat for specifically our water truck and our service truck that goes out and fuels equipment in the morning is we have the old military transfer site over by the generation plant that has been abandoned years ago, was no longer in use. Our mechanics took and basically plywood boarded and visqueened that all in, and we're pumping heat into that. And it's marginal at best, but we're keeping our service truck and our water trucks parked in there to keep them from freezing up.
Right.
Is that it?
That's all I had.
Get the train moving.
Yeah.
Good.
Silver lining vein, I did hear a rumor, maybe you guys can tell me. I think the earthquake actually gave us a little bit more airspace.
It shook it up like Jello, help.
Compressed some of the fill.
But the main takeaway is that the warm storage building and the maintenance shop out there are red tags, so we can't go back in them whatsoever.
Mr. Dunbar.
Can I ask another question for the SWS guys? So I know we obviously pump out methane gas to that power plant out there for
Yes,
going
sir.
on. Did the earthquake disrupt that at all? I mean, I know there's basically tubes that run down into the lower reaches of the landfill. Were any of those bent or damaged?
So through the chair, as of right now, the gas collection system is functioning exactly as it was prior to the earthquake. We had an earthquake in 2016 that we actually wound up losing 5 of the wells. As of right now, everything appears to be up and functional, but truthfully, it'll be months before everything finishes settling and we know for sure.
Okay.
But as of right now, everything is still functioning as it was the day before.
Do earthquakes ever sort of release the gas? I mean, does it break it up in a way where you can test it and see if it's getting more methane to the surface?
So I don't believe you, so far as surface, that's where that crack comes in that one picture was that was our biggest concern with the cracks in the slopes, was release of landfill gas, because landfill gas is going to take the path of least resistance.
Sure.
But for cracks like that to escape, like I said, we really lucked out. Mother Nature sealed that one up for us, because that one in particular we couldn't get to until spring. Until that's so icy on there you can't hardly walk on it, let alone try to run a piece of equipment up and down that slope.
Other questions? So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Will we know if there's any problem underneath the landfill?
As far as the liner goes, all indications right now are no. There is no damage to the liner itself. We do our quarterly well testing. We have water well monitors all the way around the landfill, and as of the last test, everything is still fine. That's the only way you'll ever know if anything happened to that. We really don't believe anything did.
So if it did in the spring when things thaw out, we would have to manage it then, or would it be something you would go in now?
Now we wouldn't know till spring.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Sherman. Mr. Baldwin.
Okay, just a second. I was gonna flip
So while
over
Bill was
here.
setting that up, right after the earthquake, we were fortunate enough to have APD come down with their drone and ask if they could do a flyover of the port and get an aerial view of things. So this is drone footage that APD provides.
So this is our dramatic reveal. So all this is revealed. But when we were doing the emergency response, one of the things that we were immediately, acutely concerned about was whether the port was going to fail, because that would have been a slow-moving calamity that would have caught up and caused much more significant problems. So on day one, which we haven't broadly advertised, which we'll advertise for you now, we called APD and we said, let's fly the drone and see what happened. And so we'll show you what we saw on day one, and Steve will give us the color commentary.
So the substance of the issues that we are going to have to deal with going forward are a whole lot of surface cracks. This is out at the north end of the port, way out where we have our barge dock, and these are some of the most prominent ones. And in this particular area, some new ones have been added since, as a consequence of the aftershocks that we've experienced. But this is a big significant one that we found way out at the north end.
And remember, that's the story that we've been engaged with MARAD in the lawsuit, that they built us this seismically unstable northern extension that could catastrophically fail and wipe out the port. And gee, it now has giant cracks in it. And really, these are somewhat surprising cracks, because this was supposed to be the most seismically stable part of the thing that they left us with.
Yeah.
This is worrying. This is not comforting.
And what you'll see, the theme that runs through it all is the surface cracks run along the land side right adjacent to where the water starts. And when we get into the freight yard, you'll see that they run behind some of where the containers are parked. And once we moved those containers away after the ships came in, we noticed even more cracks that were down in that area over there, right along the breakwater, which if you're going to get that single point of failure that's going to cause the landslide that goes underneath those corroded piling, this is exactly where it's going to happen. And this is some of the worst of it right here. This didn't stop for 3 days of cracking and sliding. All that area there, that's behind those containers. That's the wharf that not only our warehouse is on, but the port's offices are on that particular wharf right there. This is one of those areas that we chose not to wait till spring to get a fix in. We actually went out there and dumped a significant amount of fill in that hole over there to keep that stabilized. and removed and replaced some of the armor rock in that area there so that would stop the slide, because we just watched that get bigger. This was on Friday when we had Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski there on Monday. It was bigger yet.
One of the lessons that we have many lessons that we learned from this action, but one of them was helicopters are nice, but drones are better in this circumstance. And so we actually, on day one, flew the port and several of our fire stations. We didn't find anything in any of the fire stations. On day two, we flew the port again. The pictures aren't quite as dramatic because we got a little bit of snow that covered a lot of this stuff up. And Briggs Bridge in Eagle River to see if there was anything more concerning there.
So I said it again, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dunbar.
Mr. Falls, this is the APD's drone? Or
This is
a private?
the only drones we own in the municipality are police drones. We have two, and we had the crews go out during the emergency. Yeah. Okay. I think that-
Well, that means we're going to get a report on this, right? I'm trying to remember how.
Yeah, we have an annual reporting requirement now, and I think we did it in the spring, I think is when the report comes out. So yes, you will get a piece of paper at some point that says, in addition to whatever else we might have done, I don't think we really used the drone in any other serious way. During the emergency, we flew it several times all around the municipality, and it was helpful.
Yeah. Now, what does what's it really look like under the dock? We did the best we could, given the weather conditions and the time of year we have. But as it is with every single season, until we get those significant low tides that we get in the springtime and the ice is gone and we got enough daylight to really get under the dock and look, we just know from an operational perspective, so far so good. Nobody's reporting any issues with working on the dock, but we will get under there and do a really good review of everything and a really good assessment of everything come springtime. But in the meantime, we're open for business, and just everybody's keeping an eye on these cracks because they haven't gone anywhere. And we'll get on to filling those and repairing the pavement in the springtime as well.
Okay, so
Are there any photos of the fill?
of the
Fill that you've put in out there? I guess it's all covered now.
No.
But did you have photographs of the fill when it was put in?
I think we do. I think we do. It was one of our guys. We leased a backhoe and had the material on hand. So it took about a day and a half of work to get that filled in. I will check to see if we've got some video.
Thank you.
Okay. Want me to be Vanna? I'll be Vanna.
No, I'll just sit here
Okay.
and talk about it. Our system came through the earthquake pretty well. We have some issues that we are going to talk about. The Eklutna Hydro, there is one issue that we know in particular that we're working on. There are a couple of others that we are going to be doing some additional investigation. Chugach has responsibility for the dam and the tunnel. The tunnel is the green line that goes from the lake over to the powerhouse, which is the kind of round square piece on the top there. MLMP has responsibility for the powerhouse, which produces the power and also has a substation that sits on top of it. So if we go to the next slide, this is the substation that sits on top of the powerhouse. There are 6 transformers that are up on top of here. 5 of the 6 were damaged, some significantly damaged, the others. But what we are going to do is replace all 6. We have the Eklutna Operating Committee has met a couple of times now, and they have identified a source for these 6. I believe MEA has 3 that we can use, and those are being tested. We've identified 3 that are in the lower 48 that can be shipped up here. It's probably going to take 4 to 6 weeks to do all of the work that's up there. During this time period, the plant itself has been shut down. We were able to re-energize one of these to be able to move power that kind of goes through here and is not the power that's generated by the power plant. Next slide. This is the powerhouse. You can then see the substation that's up on the top of it. MLMP has dewatered the plant itself, and we're going to use a robot to go in and check the penstock and other stuff that you don't want people moving around in. We have not identified any issues with either the tunnel or the powerhouse, but we're going to do the investigation to make sure, well, the plant is offline and the substation is being repaired. We don't anticipate that there are any major issues, but until we get the reports back, we won't know. Chugach is contracting for a submersible that will go the 4-mile length of the tunnel to be able to check the inside of the tunnel that feeds the water into the powerhouse. Next slide. Oh, go ahead.
Can we have an item on our agenda, actually, something along those lines?
Yes.
That we passed last night or a couple nights ago.
Yep. I believe that's funding.
It was $115,000 for some kind of pig, I thought it was. That was going to go.
And that's probably the robot.
That was that's Brett's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we wanted to piggyback on the work that you guys know we were doing on the tunnel, so that we could go right into our raw water diversion line in the tunnel.
Our distribution system, we had a couple of substations that were taken offline. We were able to go in, reset them, get everything back in place within about 2 hours. The two biggest issues that we had were 2 distribution transformers. The one on the right, or on the left, is on top of the JCPenney's building. And you can see down on the bottom left of it that the arm came away from the transformer. We thought we might have to get a crane and actually lift that off and replace it. We were able to fix it and bring JCPenney's back up fairly quickly. We were ready to bring them up faster than they wanted us to turn the power back on. So they were the last of our customers, and that was at their request. The one on the right was the Park Service building. The transformer had some issues. It leaked oil. We were able to contain the oil, and we did replace that transformer. But as I mentioned earlier, our system actually fared pretty well with the earthquake. Had it been a longer, I mean, it was obviously a very violent earthquake. Had it been longer, we would have had more problems. Next slide. All of our buildings have been inspected by the insurance inspectors as well as structural engineers. You can see that the picture on the left is in one of our buildings. We have cracks in the walls, but they are not structural in nature, so that we will be able to fix those. As solid waste showed, there are cracks in the walls which require us to replace sheetrock and that type of thing. All of our buildings are actually, we're able to utilize them. The picture on the right is our tech services building, and we had a sprinkler shear off in the fire suppression system, which flooded this. This is actually the second floor of the building, and so it flooded this area. It then flooded down into the first floor, and our servers are in that particular building. We were able to move to our backup servers, shut off the water, shut off the power to the building. We're in the process of going through, and this is probably the highest cost for our buildings that we're going to have, because we'll have to replace a lot of carpet, sheetrock, and other things. This is one of the oldest buildings that we have, and so there is some asbestos in the building, in the mastic, in the flooring, and so we'll have to do the cleanup of that with a licensed contractor. Next slide. The picture on the left is one of our warehouses, and we had equipment that was stacked there to be utilized. As you can see, it's now stacked on top of itself. Some of those were actually damaged. I believe about half of them didn't sustain any major damage, and so we were able to set the shelves back up and put those in place. The right one is a little hard to see, but that is one of the concrete columns in one of our buildings, and as you can see, the two bolts that come down that hold the column to the roof, the concrete sheared away from it. The structural engineers say that it is in fact still safe, and we will go in and we'll repair it, but all the buildings are still usable at this time. Next slide. And I guess that is my last slide. So any questions that anybody might have?
Mr. Dunbar?
2 questions. One, and I suppose not, because the asset purchase agreement was accepted, but this is maybe a question for you, Bill, as well. I mean, the damage that we've sustained any of it significant enough that's going to be factored into the purchase price?
Through the chair, no. The asset purchase agreement says that from the time it's signed until we close, that any damage that is sustained to any of our facilities is our responsibility to fix, with an upper limit, and I believe that's $20 million, and at that point, we then talk about whether or not we fix it, and then adjust the price. None of this has risen to that level. We don't anticipate that there are issues with Eklutna, but as Chugach does the inspection of the tunnel and we do the inspection of the powerhouse, there may be some things that we do need to address there, but we believe that they can be addressed and won't affect the purchase.
Thank you.
Yeah, two questions.
Yeah, my second question. So, you said that the plant has been dewatered. Does that mean that there isn't water flowing through? I mean, clearly there's enough water. There's water coming to AWU because we're all drinking it. So the water is at least getting that far. Is it going all the way out and just going to the trail race, Tail race, without hitting the turbines, or is it not going down the pipe at all?
Through the chair, there are actually two pipelines. The one that goes to AWU, it comes off of the line, but it doesn't. That's water goes over to AWU's facility.
Right.
There is the tunnel that goes through the mountain, and there is water in the tunnel. But within the plant, we have doors that we can close so that when we do maintenance on it, you don't close the door and then let all the water go out necessarily, because you'd be wasting a lot of water. But you can dewater the plant, close those doors and seal it, and then you can take the water that is within the plant that would normally go through the turbines that would go out into the tail race, and you let that go out, and then you can actually get into some of those areas and get a better look inside of it. So right now, there is not water that's flowing through the tunnel, through the powerhouse into the tail race.
Okay, that's my question. So, we've already been closed for 2 or maybe almost 3 weeks now since the earthquake, and 3 weeks. Is that right? So
Yeah.
And then we're thinking 4 to 6 more weeks. So we're talking 7 to 9 weeks of water that's staying in the reservoir. Is that what's happening to it, or where is it going?
Yes, it will stay in the reservoir because the inflows into the lake will be there. I'm trying to remember what the lake level was. I believe on Monday it was 854.
So I hope that everybody's keeping really close records of this and what that looks like, because of course we're having serious discussions about how we use that water and what percent of that water might someday be diverted into the Eklutna River again. And so I hope we keep records, and I trust that you do, of what this looks like in terms of impact on the lake level, what it looks like impact on the ratepayers. Like, we've closed down what we've said is the cheapest kilowatt hour on the rail belt, except for maybe Bradford Lake. So what is it actually doing? This is what the economists call a natural experiment. It's not something that we're happy is happening, but it's something that can be really valuable data that I think can be used in the coming years when we make a decision about how much water exactly can we afford to divert into the river.
I would ask a clarifying question. What I heard you say, maybe I misunderstood, is that at the power plant, you shut off the water coming in, but the water is still flowing through the pipe.
Well, the water is in the tunnel.
Trapped in the pipe.
Okay, so it's shut off at the bottom.
And the water to AWU is still flowing through the pipe.
Right, AWU side, but not,
Yes.
okay, so it's
On our
capped
side,
at the bottom.
yes, we have gates that we can close off,
Right.
so that and the water will still be in the tunnel,
Right, it's not
but
flowing.
it's not going anywhere.
Gotcha, okay.
So the tunnel was charged, but at some point that must back up, and so now there is water that otherwise would be going out to the tail race that is staying in the reservoir.
And at time, we don't operate Eklutna 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
so the water, it will be from the reservoir at the edge of that, and if it doesn't go into the tunnel and go through the powerhouse, then the lake level rises.
Yeah. And so are we, the data I talked about the impact on the ratepayer, the impact on the lake level, are we keeping that data?
We know how much power we would normally flow through, and in this period of time, we know how much power is not being flown through, and so we can compare periods of time and say, that the cost to the customer was this or that.
obviously we track the lake level.
And we track the lake level, yes.
So if I might then kind of put a summary on that, what I'm hearing is that it's an opportunity to demonstrate that there is water available, at least in the next 12 months, for flow into the Kootenai River.
Well, there has been,
As a bank.
I mean, it depends on how you look at it. There has been talk and requests from the Kootenai and the other sort of stakeholders that do a flushing flow.
Right.
And it does seem like we now have 8 weeks worth of water that could potentially go to that, although that's not really how the physics work. But the lake level is going to be not insignificantly higher than it would be. We're talking almost 2.5 months by the time this is all done, right? 2.5 months of the water that would have gone through the pipe is not going to go through the pipe.
And we utilize the Kootenai, as you mentioned, that it's the cheapest source of power, so we utilize it to peak shape. And so we're not running it all the time. And because if we did, we'd exhaust the water in about 3 months. And so there's always water that's in there, and the lake level moves up and down. In order to do the flushing flow, you've got to get the water up high enough to where it will spill. And we're still, at this point, I believe, 17 feet below that. And so, and this time of year obviously is not the time when we get a lot of water in. That's between, say, July and August, September, when about 82% of the water that flows into the reservoir comes into it. So this time of year, we're not seeing a lot of water that comes in.
So last question on the topic from me, unless Mr. Croft has arrived, the web director of the lake. Is there an environmental concern at the bottom if there isn't water flowing or there's salmon spawning down there that might be impacted by the negative flow?
Last year we did we worked on Unit 1, and we rehabbed Unit 1. In 2019, we're going to rehab Unit 2. And so there were periods of time where there wasn't water that flowed out into the tailways. There were periods of time where it was a significantly reduced amount of water because we were only able to run one. And to my knowledge, it has not been brought to our attention that it is an issue at this point. But we did reach out to the state because they monitor the fisheries related to the tailways.
So isn't this something, though, that you might not see the impact of for 3 to 5 years, depending on the species?
That is possible, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Croft?
Yeah, apologize for having to step out. So in that high water period, July through September, if it got very near the top, even if you didn't need the power, night times or whatever, wouldn't it make sense to just spill some water so you didn't have to write a check to AWU? Wouldn't that be an appropriate thing to do to protect your rate base?
Well, we don't write a check to AWU. AWU writes a check to us.
So AWU would avoid writing it. I mean, if it got to a point, you want to guarantee that they do, and if it got too high, they wouldn't have to. Right?
There might be an adjustment to the price that they paid. You are correct. But we have had very few times in the last 20 or 30 years where the water has gotten to the level that it would spill, and that's without without running the plant all the time. We can manage the lake level pretty well without running it all the time.
Shouldn't you, from your fiduciary responsibility, manage the lake level so that you maximize the amount of money in, and doesn't that involve making sure that those AWU payments always come in?
We maximize the amount of money, or the benefit for our customers, MLP customers, Chugach customers, NDA customers. We all maximize that by the way that we utilize the water that's there and when we utilize the water. So that if, for instance, I'll pick on Chugach because Brian's sitting back there. If they would have to turn on a beluga unit, which is extremely expensive, they might utilize more of their water at that time instead of turning it on. For us, if one of the units at Plant 2A was down and we were going to have to start Unit 7 or 8, which are inefficient units, we would utilize more of the water at that time. Same way that we do with Bradley, is we utilize the hydro to optimize the use of our thermal generation.
Do you owe any fiduciary duty to AWU?
I would say no. That AWU does its business to benefit its ratepayers, and we are two separate entities in the eyes of the RCA. So we have to do the things that benefit our ratepayers, and not necessarily do something that benefits AWU. However, the water that we do sell to them is, I think, probably the cheapest source of water that they can get.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So just a brief sideline. Does Chugash want to make any report on their earthquake response since you're here?
Yeah.
Just maybe 3 minutes or less.
Sure. I didn't bring a presentation, but Lee asked me to stop by here. I'm the chief operating officer for Chugash. We have completed our preliminary assessment of the 42 substations that we had. And we're doing sort of a more detailed assessment of the rest of them. We had significant damage at Point McKenzie substation, which is probably our largest switch yard, and it's located on the other side of the water. It's about 5 miles from Point Warren's off. We have submarine cables that go over there. At that location, we have a 230,000 volt switch yard and a 138,000 volt switch yard. There are about 20 230,000 volt air brake switches. Of that, 13 of them broke and fell down. So that switch yard, which sort of forms the core of the central region of the grid, is out of service right now. We put in a workaround where we've tapped a line that goes out towards Teelan substation, which is up by Settlers Bay on Knickoos Bay Road. And we've sort of reestablished that connection between Anchorage and the valley around that loop. We had significant damage at Teelan substation. We have the two of the 3 lines going to our Beluga power plant are still out of service as a result of the Point McKenzie problems we had. We have some fairly significant damage at University substation, which is located on Tudor and Martin Luther King Drive, right sort of by the police crime investigation lab right there, the state lab. And we're working to get that repaired. We have problems with the bus work, which are the conductors inside the fence of the substation out there. And we have, we've been through all of our distribution substations. We have some minor damage to a handful of the distribution substations, and one in particular, which is near the municipal transfer station. We're going to have to rebuild the foundations for the transformer and the switchgear at that location. So that's kind of where we're at. We think the number is, at this point, it's less than $10 million, probably closer to 5, but we really have just gotten to a preliminary assessment at this point. So.
Thank you. Any questions?
And Chairman, Tony Zeller is here with MEA, and
Great.
so I don't know if you want.
Please,
if
yeah.
he wants to make any
I understand
comments.
MEA had a lion's share of the trouble, so let's hear it.
Well, we have line share. I'm Tony Zellers, Director of Power Supply at Music Electric. So the line share of our damage, we've done preliminary, just like Brian, all our substations. During the earthquake, we had 4 substations damaged, 2 of which are in the Muni territory. The Pibble substation in Eagle River and the Briggs substation, which is up valley in the river. So currently, the Briggs substation is still out of service. We're waiting parts for the transformer there. The bushings on the transformers were broken. So we're able to easily feed that load. It's a very small load substation, so we're easily able to feed that. So we should expect that to be back in service by the end of the month for that. So the Cleveland power plant that we have, the only real damage I've had there is my overhead cranes. So I'm trying to structural line in here, look at that. We're still getting preliminary results on the overhead cranes. So it may affect maintenance a little bit, but it doesn't affect the operation of the plant. But overall, we came to it actually pretty good on the substations. The Pibble substation is back in service. We welded it back together that night. So
Thank you. Any
happy to
questions?
answer any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much. Mr. Palsy.
Mr. Joe?
Well, thank you. I'll go through pretty quickly. I want to add a couple thoughts about what we did on Friday in response to the initial effects. And I'd like to show you this, if I can get it to work. Yeah, there we go. We got calls from people around the community, and this one happened to come with a video. It's kind of interesting. She says, it looks like a water line broke.
Where is that?
This is near the Anchorage Jail.
Yeah, 3rd Avenue.
So some of our effects were pretty evident pretty early on. Oops, I didn't do that.
I'm going to autoplay a whole bunch of other flood videos now. Here, I'll try it.
Okay, we'll move on. We depend a lot on our remote monitoring for about 250 facilities around the community, and our SCADA system, our supervisory control and data acquisition system, allows us to monitor demand and monitor reservoir levels. You can see that the typical day would have been Thursday night, the 29th to the 30th of November. We dropped down to about 20 million gallons a day of production, up to about 25. I'm sorry, down to about 10 at night, and up to about 25 in the daytime. It's pretty typical. Thursday night dropped back down to about 10, and then on Friday morning it went back up to 25 and kept on going. So this is an indication that we're using a lot more water than we intended to. We looked a little bit harder and found out that most of that demand was attributable to Eagle River. So we looked at the systems within Eagle River, and we determined that the Gruning Reservoir, just south of the Briggs Bridge, dropped from an elevation of 30 feet in the reservoir down to nothing in the course of about 40 minutes. That's 250,000 gallons that disappeared in the blink of an eye. And that began to affect the next reservoir upstream from there, the Meadow Creek Reservoir, also in Eagle River. We got those pipelines shut down, partly by virtue of the fact that we could use the SCADA system to determine what the problem was. And within a couple hours, by early afternoon, we were refilling the reservoirs, both at Meadow Creek and at Gruning. We didn't know what the problem was immediately with the Gruning Reservoir, so we continued to go out and check out things and determine that there was a line break, in fact, right near the Briggs Bridge. And you may recall that the Briggs Bridge was closed. Well, actually, our guys made the determination that it deserved to be closed based on the potential for a lot of erosion around the bridge and around the abutments. So you can thank us for that, I suppose. Meanwhile, we're producing a lot more water, but at the same time, we saw a decrease in the amount of water we could produce from the Eklutna water treatment facility. Again, we're producing on Thursday morning, Friday morning, 18 to 20 million gallons a day, up to about 30 million gallons a day. It's about as much as we could do. And then we started seeing spikes in the cloudiness or the turbidity of the water in the lake. And when the water got cloudier, the production fell off because our filters were getting jammed faster. So we went from a turbidity, that's the measure of the cloudiness of the water, from typically about 6 or 7 is our typical number this time of year, up to over 300. Our scale stops at 100 here, but you can tell right away that something was happening in the lake that was making the water a lot cloudier, causing a lot of loss of production. Well, that combined with the increased demand at Eagle River, that was a cause for concern. So what do? First thing out was that we didn't have any power from MEA early on Friday morning, so we had to go on backup power. We have a turbine generator on site where we take water out of the raw water line, take power out of the raw water line coming in, but that doesn't work unless we're actually on the grid power with MEA. So we had to go to our backup generator, and then we realized, well, we don't know how long the power is going to be out. We have limited diesel on site, so one of the first things we did on Friday morning was line up a fuel vendor and make sure that we had support for fuel delivery, even if that meant APD escort through the bunched up traffic to get out to Eklutna. At the same time,
to say that
yep.
That was one of our early concerns on day 1 too. And at one point, when the highway was impassable, our regular fuel supply lines were disrupted because we couldn't get fuel to the north of the municipality, and so we rerouted and we got some stuff from Palmer Wasilla, but I mean, you're getting a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain here.
Yeah. So we turn on wells. We have 14 wells that we use distributed around the bowl and in Girdwood to bolster that Eklutna water production, and we could help us meet the demand. But that requires backup power too, because we're still out of power in those locations. And we were also limited with how much disinfectant we were able to provide at each of the well sites. So we engaged the contractor for assistance with fuel distribution, and we actually went to Eklutna, to our water plant, to get some hypochlorite disinfectant to move to the well sites. That's a long haul, also disrupted by traffic. So we were pretty happy when the power came back on. Thank you very much, NLP and Tugach and MEA. But we were still going to be short on disinfectant. Ship Creek is undergoing an upgrade right now. We're just about ready to commission the Ship Creek water plant. Not quite. But what we realized was that the disinfectant on-site generation worked at that site. So we built up a source of hypochlorite for distribution around to the well sites. And by the end of the weekend, we had 6,000 gallons of disinfectant in storage on site at Ship Creek. And we could truck that around if we had to. Happily, the power stayed on, and we didn't have any further concerns about production at that point. Again, on Friday morning, we were all pretty surprised with Quaker Oats, and we had a number of pretty rudimentary tools to try and figure out what was going on and track what was happening. In our field service area, we had a list of breaks, a list of calls that were coming in. In the offices upstairs, which was our department operations center, you might call, we were making another list on a whiteboard. We were making a list again at the King Street Operations Center. So we were duplicating our reference a little bit, and we realized that we had to come together. So we worked pretty quickly to get up a spreadsheet that we were sharing and keeping track of the issues that came up. By the same token, we had our engineers work with GIS to build not only an understanding of a list of the locations, but also where the locations, so we could help distribute crews as appropriate to respond. You can see the red dots here are ones that are problematic and need work. The yellow ones are in progress, and the green ones are issues that have been resolved. All over the city, all over Eagle River, and down to Girdwood as well.
What's the timeline on that? Is that on Friday, or is that?
This would have been probably mid-Saturday.
Of that?
Mid to late Saturday of December 1st.
And so now we're pretty well past all this.
I'm getting to that. Don't get ahead of me.
Thank you.
Well, so what computer program were you using for that map again?
That's ArcGIS. It's the same system that the community uses across the board.
And we actually house GIS at it, right? Or we used to?
We used to. We have somewhat independent systems now. We share a lot of the data, but it was our guys at AWU that built this program to track these data. We had field service and engineers running around the city, tracking some of these calls and responding to the calls that we got. You can see water causing separation of soils in the South Anchorage home. We saw spills, as indicated by this. We saw sewage overflows. You don't want to be tramping around in that area of town. Underneath the snow, there might be stuff that you don't want to tramp around in. We'll just leave it at that. This is a picture of the pedestrian bridge that leads to Gruning Middle School, I think, across the Eagle River Loop Road. You can see that it's impassable. Well, that was a surprise that came up from that. Some of that 250,000 gallons that came out of the reservoir showed up inside this culvert and passageway and made it impassable. But also impeded our ability to get down 21 feet to the pipeline there. So we worked with DOT to close that pedestrian passageway and excavate to make 3 repairs on the site there. We're still responding, and we're trying to respond with as much documentation as we can. We had issues at the bus barn, a hole in the bottom of the pipe. We had excavation and Turnigan. The ground settled and caved in the pipe. for the sewer service there. We had a water line pull apart on Aircraft Drive. It creates quite a stir when 12 inches of water pipe pull apart. We had the crew at Aircraft Drive moved to Nathan Drive across town where there was another leak as it was from the water running down the street. We had a pretty large break at 2nd and Cordova. Happily, we didn't cost anybody their water service because that stretch of Cordova there is no services available, so we're able to valve off that section of Cordova and complete the fix without impact to customers. It did get a little wet though. We had all kinds of different issues from pipes pulling apart, as I mentioned, to pipes that were old and corroded that got shaken up and corrosion failed. We had issues where there were corroded bolts on hydrant tops or valve tops that popped due to the weakening of the bolts over time and the shake that occurred. We had breaks like this, a long longitudinal break on 1st Avenue, which is usually a result of an older pipe where the metals have aged and what's called graphitized, and then a pressure buildup or pressure spike comes through and will rip a whole length of that pipe out. This is probably just one of the longer sections of pipe that we had to repair, and this is only about 8 or 10 feet. So a lot of these things that we worked with were point issues. A lot of digs, a lot of different places. There's a sewer service that broke out down in southwest Anchorage, where a lot of the community is situated on what technicians call wiggly dirt, and the sewer system failed. The sewer service failed, actually. We had a couple of issues along that street. But these line breaks can be a source of contamination, so we advise caution. We had a number of issues from vendors that were concerned about, could they spray their vegetables, could they serve the coffee, could they wash the dishes. We didn't tell them that you couldn't do it, but we told them that we couldn't guarantee that the water was safe. So we issued a boiled water advisory out of what Mr. Falsey called an overabundance of caution, or maybe just an abundance of caution, which we appreciate. It took us, and it takes generally 24 hours to incubate and analyze the bacteriological testing. We got those tests done at over 100 sites on Saturday. Test came back at 1:30 on Sunday, and we lifted the boil water notice by about 2 o'clock on Sunday. Several repairs are still in progress. We have, to your question, Mr. Constant, we have about 5 or 6 areas that are still hurting, and in fact we got some new spots out here near Boniface Parkway, what some of our engineers have called Corrosion Alley. We had 4 breaks on Thursday night. Were they related to the earthquake? Probably. Can we say that definitively? Not right now. But we're also working on Kissy Court, right across the street from Governor Walker's house, which is very handy. And the sewer manhole collapsed there, bypass pumping's in place, and that repair is close to being completed. There's a couple other sites out at Rosewood near the recycling station, out Ascot Street. Similar issue to the neighborhood where the sewer service collapsed. As far as our buildings, we're still evaluating structural integrity of these facilities. We've got, as I said, like 250 facilities around the city. We've been to most of them. Those are the green spots that have been cleared. We've got yellow tags at 3 sites, at the Clutton Water Treatment Facility, at a booster station here in Eagle River at Highland Crest, and down here at the Girdwood Wastewater Treatment Facility. We'll take a quick look at those. We've seen some separation of beams, some separation of vertical members, giving us concerns about the structural capabilities of the building, but that never impeded our operations, and we were able to continue to provide water throughout the emergency. Highland Crest is an older building, cement mortar units, cinder blocks, cracks there. We posted to make sure that we didn't have operators walking in and having stuff fall on their heads. So we are currently having our structural engineer review that building as well. And the last facility that was endangered was similar to what we've seen elsewhere. We've had some crane issues. We don't want you going into the building without a hard hat and without somebody with you. We also had some concrete spalling. This is an older facility. We've been trying for years to get permitted with DEC so we can replace that facility with something that meets modern standards of structural integrity. Just want to say that critical communications were maintained throughout the response. That was critical to our ability to respond across the community. Using the SCADA system, using radio and cell communications. If we had lost a radio tower, if we had lost cell towers, that would have seriously impeded our ability to respond. Both with field crews, between facilities where we have all of our folks distributed, and with the Muni Emergency Operations Center as well. We found that the Emergency Operations Center at the Muni provided for some very important points of communication for our folks with other agencies. We also expanded our use of social media very quickly. People want to know about this stuff, and they're going to look to Twitter, they're going to look to Facebook. And we had like 68,000% increase in Facebook usage.
Amazing.
But it ain't over till it's over. We expect more breaks. We're going to continue to carefully log time and document costs. We're going to prioritize those repairs and learn what we learn and put those lessons to use in our hazard response plan, in our design practices, construction manual, and implement those improvements in system design.
So we are really at the edge of time. I do have 3 quick questions I'm going to run by you. As for emergency power, I know you have a gravity-fed system up there. Isn't it feasible to come up with a system that you could just flip a switch at the valve and create power locally without diesel?
That would require, it's considerably possible to do that. There's some phasing electrical stuff that I don't quite understand. So our outside provider, MEA, is taking power that we create, excess power that we create from our turbine, and we need to make sure that power is engaged in order to make that happen. I think there's probably other workarounds we could do to make that happen.
Yeah, it seems like you should, with all the energy you have coming down the mountain, you could come up with your own power. And then second, is it feasible to set up, I'm sure you're doing this emergency prep for the future, set up staging in town for key ingredients for sterilization? I mean, is there a plan for that? Because it seems like if the bridge goes out here and there and we have a big problem come up.
That's part of our lessons learned, is to be able to stage the disinfectant feedback.
And then finally, you wrote Fish Creek complicates on your slide in turn again. What did that mean?
I think that means that the fact that the break was close to Fish Creek is hard to work that because of the groundwater and the surface water in the excavation.
All right, thank you. Any last questions? Hearing none, we're out of time for this committee. Thank you.